Hello and welcome to LanguageCraft for a brand new episode of Let's Timelapse. Today is episode 18. We're really getting close to the end of the season, the big finale. It's been almost 2 years that we started working on this village, and it's really come a long way, even though clearly progress is slow. It's taking a long time, but actually I'm happy I took my time and watched the town grow day after day, month after month, year after year. In the last episode, we built the small castle that will become the big castle in the next episode, with its big inner bailey and the wooden lower bailey that will grow and solidify during episode 19. But today, we're going to take a look at ships, as the title of the episode indicates, and something very special in this episode is also that we are finally doing something that you have been asking for ages. We are upgrading. Within a few shots, we will go from version 1.5 to 1.7 of Minecraft, which opens up a whole new realm of possibilities. So why the change of heart? Well, quite simply, I thought it was impossible to do it, so I didn't. And I ended up figuring a way to upgrade while keeping my shaders, which was everything I needed except connected textures. So I was able to import my shaders, and I really didn't want to change the look, the aesthetic of the show. So now we're able to take advantage of a score of new blocks. Of course, we have hay for stables, but also stained clay, which is really a big deal. Anyway, on to today's topic. We're starting with a leisure nef, or carrack. Ships weren't really used for leisure or pleasure during the Middle Ages, but this manner is anachronistic in any case. Might as well go all out. I chose a nef specifically because it's the most common ship during the Middle Ages. Many derivatives were made and they were used for various things: trade, war, and even leisure in this case. As Oriendo said in the history brief he gave me, they remained the same type of boat even though they varied in terms of shape and size. Carracks were used from the 7th century until the 15th century, when caravels appeared and stole the spotlight, since they were able to travel much farther. A carrack for war was very wide to be able to board other ships as well as be boarded, whereas trading ships, whose design is close to the one that we're building, are a lot slimmer, sleeker. We might also think that this specific model is quite old, since the front mast is at an angle, since those masts straightened out as time went by. The same goes for the sails. The triangular design like the one we're making here is actually quite old. They became rectangular for more recent models like most traditional ships. Our second ship is a barge. They were used for fishing and river transportation, this one being the latter, but a fishing barge will be built in the next shot. So we placed this one in a strange place. We would have preferred putting this dock on the other side, but with the castle's bridge, it didn't really work. If we had known, we would have built it a little differently. But this is finally the time to address a comment that I received many times. Bill, why don't you have a quarry, since your castle is made out of stone, and during the Middle Ages, people mostly built with what was around them? Well, you're right, except that I find it completely unrealistic to have a quarry so close to the coast, since it would be filled with water. Water seeps into the ground. Hence this barge, which goes back and forth along this river, bringing stone every time. That's how the castle was built. In this shot, we're building two different ships. On the left, Dedelush is building a big one, while I build another barge on the right, a fishing barge which doesn't have a sail, but was used for fishing, since it could maneuver above sandbanks. The bigger ship is another carrack, but for fishing this time, which Dedelush redid several times because he was never happy with the result. Something important to note is that this was my very first time building ships in Minecraft. I much prefer very square, straight shapes, and ships are full of curves. They require a different way of thinking, and it doesn't attract me that much even though it was fascinating. Dedelush took me by the hand and taught me a whole lot of tricks to guide me along. I started out by copying on one side what he had done on the other, and as time went by I started doing my own designs, shapes, and adding my own personal touches. Generally speaking, our building technique in this episode was different from the usual, since we usually just draw basic layouts and build everything in the spur of the moment. Whereas in this episode, most ships were entirely built beforehand and copied during the episode. That's the case of the first carrack, the 2 barges, and the galley that you'll discover in the next shot. Unlike the current carrack and the cog at the end of the time-lapse. The reason for which we did a lot of copying, of our own work of course, is that I was just starting out and needed some kind of base, so we did it less as the ships went by. And also, to be honest, a ship takes forever to build. Unlike a house that takes up to, let's say, an hour, a single ship takes several hours for a single builder because of the more complex shapes. You might also notice that we build things in a strange order. Not at all the logical order for such a build. You'll see for the last ship of the episode that you build the structure first, make a cross for the center, then the hull, one element after another. But in the case of this galley that I'm building, for example, I'm copying block for block what we built previously, and it doesn't look natural. It's a good way to start, but you have to then move on and fly by your own wings, so to speak. So anyway, about this galley. Galleys were the biggest boats in olden times. They were really massive as far back as antiquity, but they had many different variations. I have a list here by Oriendo of the different variations. Let's try to go through all of it in one breath. Bireme, trireme, jaggernaut, drahman, merchant galley, Venetian galley, galleass, galleon, carrack, siege galley, gaban, pamphile, and clankards. I'm not sure about all of these, I couldn't find a perfect translation, and it definitely doesn't include every type. There are probably some missing. But already, it's quite the list, and it shows the ship's importance. Rather than being replaced over time, it was simply adapted. And one of the galley's specificities is that it was mainly propelled by oars rather than only its sail. The oars were used to complement the sail, especially in an attack phase. Even though in our case we have a merchant galley, it still has to be able to defend itself. Now in our case, the closest real-life ship to ours is the Venetian galley, with its single level of oars, unlike the drahman for example, which is a lot bigger and a lot more suited for combat, which is why I chose this one. Venetian galleys didn't all come from Venice, but at any rate I thought that it didn't make sense to have huge trading ships here since this harbor is only used as a stop between 2 larger harbors. And as a last fun fact on this ship, unlike the carracks or the barge, this ship wasn't built ahead of time for this series, but rather for Flag Wars 3, an adventure series LanguageCraft has been working on for several years. So even though it's only going to be in French, except for time-lapses, there's your first look at the map. And finally, here's the town's military vessel. We figured that any town on the coast had to have some sort of fleet, to at least protect the traders. We put it out at sea and chose the cog. It wasn't on the list that Oriendo gave me, but I happened upon it online while doing research, and loved the sort of fat aspect that it has. It's really thin at the front, and very thin at the back, but really comes out in the middle. And it's really different from the sleek carracks. When I suggested it, Oriendo said that it was a great idea, since this ship started being used broadly during the 13th century. It comes from the north, like longships, but was popularized in other countries. Our town is most likely situated in Normandy, in France, so it's close to the northern countries and might even have been attacked by Nords. Maybe they captured the boat or even bought it during or after a fight. Something that I find very interesting on medieval ships in general is those sort of castles at the front and the back of the ship. A ship may have nothing to do with the building. In its function or shape, they still have crenellation. They absolutely wanted those crenels behind which archers could hide. Cogs are very similar to carracks in that they have the same uses and properties, just the shape and size are different. A lot of both types of ships were used for trading as well as war, even though of course modifications had to be done in each case. Oh, and by the way, you may have noticed I spent about half the time-lapse trying to make sense of the rigging. They're really hard to make. You have to find the exact shape to make them look tight, and ships have lots of them. We even added some more after the time-lapse because the sail is actually attached all over the place. The sides, the front, the back, the top. But here you can see the technique for building a good-looking sail. Rather than trying to build an arched shape right away, it's better to make something flat, then a little arched, and each time digging away and going a little further in its center. You can see me, for example, digging away at the center where Dedelush has already added blocks on the other side. And we also decided to use different blocks on the ship. Taking advantage of upgrading to 1.7 and wanting to give it a different feel, we used dark oak for the hull and acacia for accents, even though it's a lot less orange in the John Smith texture pack than in the default resource pack. You might have a shock if you download the map and look at it with another resource pack. And there we go! All our ships are done. It makes it look so much more realistic, having all those masts sticking up everywhere. And you actually naturally put more detail on a ship than you do on a traditional building, which really adds to the whole feeling of the place. And historically speaking, they really make sense since our season takes place during the 13th or 14th centuries. And that's really the time when France and the neighboring kingdoms started developing their navies to stop the incessant raiding. After the fall of the Roman Empire, naval warfare all but disappeared until the Vikings imposed themselves during the 9th century and dominated many countries, including France. Starting in the 12th century, thanks to Venice, among others, the carrack appeared and changed things, even though we're still far away from the giant ships used during the Renaissance. But in terms of size, these ships work really well. They fit right in. You may also notice that we changed things here and there, like the colors on the merchant ship's flags. We figured it would have its own flag if it was only passing through, and it adds diversity, which is always a good thing. We also completely changed the cog's sail. We tried making a fish, making various emblems, and it never worked, so we just made a brush for the sail in green and grey, actually LanguageCraft's color by sheer coincidence, but currently I think it's much too heavy. We should lighten it up. Dedelush also thought we should go for something orange to contrast with the green, and perhaps go with the wood. We want to make the emblem for this sail and for the whole village, so if you have any ideas, please do suggest them as we will choose a proper emblem for the whole village during the 20th episode of the season when we can plaster it everywhere. I really enjoyed building all these ships. It's something any builder should try during his career, but I don't think they're really my style. I'll stick to more traditional buildings. Now again, a big thank you to Dedelush who gave me a great introduction to a different field of building than the one I was used to. As usual, we end with the overview map of the town. It's getting more and more difficult to capture the whole town, so I only took a screenshot of the bay with the main ships. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you very soon for episode 19 of Let's Timelapse. Bye bye.